Hi, Shu-Yi, it's Merlin. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself so people know
Oh,
who we are?
sure. Hi, I'm Shu-Yi Scott. I'm a cello teacher and I live in Austin, Texas. I love teaching my students and I love coaching teachers. Um, if you'd like to know more about me, just go to shuicello.com. And how about Merlin?
Nice. So I'm Merlin Thompson. I also have a website. It's at merlinthompson.com. And I have a podcast series there. It's called The Music Educator's Crucible. Lots of inspiration for and information for teachers on a variety of topics. And who am I? I'm a piano teacher. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Ooh, very cold and it's very warm here.
Nice.
So I'm really excited. I hope our conversation will keep going and get more teachers to share their thoughts and questions so we can have more and more learning experience for both of us and for everybody in the teachers community.
Sounds good. Absolutely great.
This dad cannot stop talking and being the second teacher in the online lesson. The teacher found that a lot of time after she gave a suggestion, the dad actually elaborated the suggestion to with a wrong interpretation. This teacher.
Boy, that's a challenge. Um, because the 13-year-old student doesn't even need their dad or mom in the lesson
That's why we
at
call.
all. But I recognize that the dad being involved maybe isn't an option. And I've had some circumstances in the past where I thought, oh, maybe I'll suggest to this parent that the child attend the lessons on their own. And the solution for the parent was to switch to another teacher who would allow the parent to sit in on the lessons all the time. So nothing really changed there at all. So, I felt very, wow, I really thought I was gentle and I was invitational and all that stuff. And the parent just went, no, if you're not going to let me sit in on the lesson, I'm moving to somebody else. So that's my first kind of situation with that. So what do you do then with a parent who wants to translate everything? Um, Somehow it feels like setting things up, and it becomes kind of like you start the lesson and you say to the and before anything happens, be, you know, I'm here to learn, or what I'm ready to learn is the statement, the bow, and then somehow what I'm thinking is that you've got to turn to and quickly, is there anything that you want to say that we should know up front? Because I know you always like to jump in during the lesson, and I don't want to be offensive, but it always feels like you have lots to say. Is there something I should hear about right now? Because if there is, that would be really good to kind of get it out. And again, it's kind of like that situation where you say to the child, um, "Could you give your mom permission to help you out?" And the child says, no, 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 or yes. So you find out what's behind it. So somehow I think, we have solutions like saying, oh, don't talk to parents, or, drop your kid off at the lesson. But that hasn't changed what's driving the parent to be contributing all the time. How do we satisfy that drive? I think we just open the door and we just look at them and say, what do you need to tell me, so we can get on before we get on with the lesson today? That kind of idea is kind of what strikes me at this point. So not being afraid of what's behind this situation,
Right.
but saying, but really welcoming the dad and saying, what is it that you're worried about? I get the impression that you're worried about certain things. Can you tell me more about what's going on?
Yeah, I think acknowledge his contribution, acknowledge his place first. That could help with the over worrying, or I think it's a pretty sticky situation.
Yeah.
And it's back to similar to the last case about the 5-year-olds. Where's the place for getting the students permission and independence, for both of them.
Yeah, we want to acknowledge that the parents' involvement, that we appreciate it, I've been using the word awareness a lot lately, as opposed to involvement. So the idea, are parents aware of what's going on, as opposed to are parents involved with what's going on? And for me, I really like those two differences because when parents are aware, they step back from the situation and they may look at it as, is this a case where I step in? Is this a case where I step back? Or is this a case where I let go? So before we do any action, we see what's our awareness of this situation, as opposed to asking the question, are you involved in this situation? Which may not be, which doesn't have for me the nuances that come with awareness. So when you're aware, you can see, oh, my child doesn't need my support, or my child needs my support. And so then you have to figure out, okay, given those two situations, what does that mean for me?
Yes, yes.
So awareness rather than just blanket involvement.
Right. I think that's the part that definitely is definitely a big topic to continue to discuss with my student parents. In my parent education talks, because as a kid, most of my students stay with me from age 3 to high school, and so during the whole time, kids grow and parents' relationship with them and with me, of course, evolve, and that's beautiful thing. But it's a big task also for if we want to be a successful studio teacher, that we do need to practice how to. The nurtured by love is nurtured by love with all parties.
Right. Yes.
And we all change and we all grow at different rate, but we are all growing, learning from each other. So the parents, you talked about the involvement. When do you decide to be involved? And a lot of time we decide to be involved before we double check on the awareness.
Right. Yeah.
So is it reactionary, or is it an action from a well thought position?
Yeah.
That definitely needs practice. I'm thinking, put myself as a Suzuki mom. in that position, it's too easy to react to a child's momentarily, at how she plays at that moment and how she not play at that moment, and so it's parenthood.
Yeah, and I think it even goes back to what I was saying, at the beginning about stability, security, and predictability. That parents are hoping to kind of help their child get their way through that, wind their way through that maze. But at the same time, I like to remind parents and myself that music lessons and learning to play a musical instrument is a very safe place for messing up. So if we get off track, very safe place for getting off track. If we, don't practice for a couple days, we're still fine. And I kind of go to, who is it? Barbara Colarosa, I think is her name. She wrote a book called Kids Are Worth It. And one of the things that she really kind of drills down on is that there are so many circumstances in life that are, what does she call them? Not morally threatening, not physically threatening. So if the situations aren't threatening my child's safety, then I'm going to let the child go and explore that. Even if it means that I'm seeing, maybe perhaps failure on occasion, mistakes on another occasion, going completely in a direction that, it's going to be tough to get out of. But this is an environment, music lessons is a great place to learn about, again, I'll go to that learning curve that we talked about, that it's got all these dips, and we're okay with that.
And that's, I think the learning curve, and the sometimes I'll draw a picture of a little person walking on hiking, and there will be little pits here or traps there, and it's like a lesson. You have tricky spots here or something there. So it's like you have, and I told them, if you watch carefully, then you can enjoy your hiking better. It's better to be careful, and so aren't we talking about life skills?
It would seem we are. And the three biggies are, what are the three biggies? Persistence. So that one can be, that can take us in a good direction. It can also take us in a bad direction, which is why we need reflection. So there's this process of, okay, so I'm keeping at it, but am I getting closer or further from the destination that I had in mind? And if we have a multiple ownership destination in mind, that places things quite differently. If we only have one place as a destination in mind, we may find that challenging. But nonetheless, what do I come to? Persistence, reflection, but I will include excellence. So the idea that I know what a high level of could be technique, could be interpretation, could be what a high level of mindset as well.
Yes.
And high level is maybe not the right word, but a flexible mindset that's able to cope with adversity and achievement both.
Yes.
So if we look at those three things, those are my big three, one that I pay a lot of attention to. And last year, I did, have two big conversations with parents to talk exactly about what those three things are and how then learning to play the piano fits in with all of that.
Right.
And so even at this point, we have now a language between us, parents, child, and teacher, that we can talk about persistence, reflection, and excellence and know what they are, as opposed to, oh, I'm the teacher, I'm juggling all the balls, and hopefully I'm doing a good job so my students and my parents will be okay. But no, actually, we're all holding all the balls. We're trying to juggle between the three of us.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I think when you mention the word excellence, I have two thoughts about that. One is I imagine most teachers, when they think of excellence, is you listen to me, you practice hard, you'll get your excellence. Like again, stability, as you mentioned, simple equation, like how I put it, is not that simple. And number two, I think, this is the other kind of teacher, like maybe giving a student a lot of freedom, letting a student pick the speed, and but miss the window to challenge them. And if that's the other side of a spectrum, is letting a student have all the freedom, but not giving a student the appropriate mind-engaging conversation or interesting task. The tasks that will keep them interested and keep them en route towards excellence. That's another type of, right? A lot of like eventually the kids lose their interest is not because they don't like the cello, it's because eventually when they were always the boss of deciding what to learn and when to learn it, and then they may be too old to, they figure out, I'm not good at this anyway. So how would you help or advise or suggest the teachers who just let the child be the boss, and how do you unveil the risk there?
Well, it is the teacher lead the way and teacher follow students lead. So those are the two things that have to happen all the time.
All the time, right.
Yeah. And I find it really interesting. We do throw around the word excellence a lot. And somehow it's become this, oh, excellence means playing at a high level. I really reinterpreted it. I equate excellence with freedom, but for me, freedom is a really because freedom has structure to it, and freedom without structure we get chaos. But structure without imagination is unbearable. So even if you just look at that, this word freedom and excellence, yeah, those are two wonderful words that go together. But then we get freedom, chaos, structure, imagination, unbearable. So there is this tension that's going back and forth all the time,
Yes.
which kind of just signals to me that it's not as simple as we might like it to be. Even this idea of excellence isn't as simple as we might like to think it is.
Right. I think so. Similar to the your idea, your idea about plateau confusion from the student side for their learning. I think the other aspect, and you have mentioned this in your podcast too, is the recognize the tension. Like it's okay. I think the teachers and parents should expect that there should be some kind of tension. There should be some kind of misunderstanding in a lesson, because when we're all human, we're talking about learning. It's such a complex subject, and
Yeah.
there from what you want to do to what can be done, there's so much space, and that's the space is causing tension. But I think it's now I'm talking as a mom also. How do we, if we recognize there's always tension, I found myself to be a little more open. I'm not relaxed. It's hard to relax, but let's be open, more open to accept more kinds of scenarios. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
Don't you think? So it's not just one picture for all.
No, it's not, and it's evolving and growing, and we're stepping forward, and then we're taking two steps backwards, and then we're stepping forward, and two steps backwards again. Yeah, so it's constantly that.
Right, and
Yeah,
I like you said, if it's, or if we say 3 steps forward, 2 steps backward, and a lot of the time we recognize the 2 steps backward, but we forget to acknowledge the 1 step forward.
yeah,
And I think that's the part that needs teach adults needs to be challenged to practice to have the ability to observe that.
yeah.
Yeah, very nice. I like that. I hope perhaps the teachers will hear this and they can get some ideas.
Yeah, I think it's a great format. And yeah, I like your idea. Bring just a couple scenarios, questions that people have. The challenge is always we don't have a lot of information for those questions.
Right.
You get 5-year-olds, so you don't know what the dynamics are. But nonetheless, there are principles involved. And this morning, what have the principles been? It's multiple ownership is for me the big category, whether it's freedom means structure, imagination, all those things, or learning means forgetting, revisiting, confusion. It's multiple in each case is our theme, really.
Right. It's sometimes think of it that I have to use analogy a lot. The idea of putting myself in in that situation, it helps me to clear up my mind. Sometimes I feel I'm a plumber, and it's how do I unclog this?
Right.
Or maybe it doesn't need to be unclogged. Maybe it's not unclogged. Maybe it's not clogged. Maybe it's the water pressure. Maybe it's some other issues, and so it's not always just find a knot and get through it. It's not that simple.
Yeah. And the challenge is because the repertoire is so clearly defined. So it's 4/16 notes and 2/8 notes, 4/16 notes, 2/8 notes. It's clearly defined. So it can seem like we should have really clear things to do all the time in our teaching as well, but that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I mean it looks simple. It looks very simple, but it's
Yeah.
a very complex, with feeling and awareness and behavioral management. It's I think in like you said, I wish of course that's why I always ask my trainees to show me bits of their teaching videos. That's more direct way to assess the situation. But I think in any case, this teacher, she must be feeling alone, and she wants some input. She wants some references, different references, and I think what maybe our conversation can provide is to help people with teachers with more references, so that they don't feel alone, and they can start thinking about other possibilities, and listen to a podcast, and think about many different ways to create more tactics, and that should help towards the freedom of teaching.
Yes. Yeah. 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 It is. It is that idea of building on and exercising what's already there. But I like this other statement that I've come up with recently about how teachers, parents, students all want to be valued for who they are and for what they do. And so when you're teaching and you can't get the student engaged, what's really going on is you feel like, oh, I'm not a valuable person. What I've got to offer isn't translating to this situation. So that can be very challenging because that's your starting point. So somehow to recognize that being valued and being appreciated are important. Sometimes we can just put that to the side to see about our student. How do we value them,
right.
And what would it look like if we valued them in that moment?
Right.
Yeah.
That you just brought up this also another big challenge in my experience of coaching new teachers is to have teachers should practice to have the ability to see what's already there, what's already there in the child, in the student. We can't assume that they don't know anything. We need to have ways to mindset and engaging mindset and know what they know. I have to admit that 20, 30 years ago when I first started teaching, I would think that having a conversation is wasting the lesson time. You know, like let's just do the scales, and after scale, let's do arpeggios. After arpeggio, let's do etude and solo and bye. That's such a superficial idea about lesson. If we have a conversation, we know what they like, and from there, having a deeper involvement with their mind, then the lesson will go hopefully more of an equal platform for a communication, and have something beautiful happen.
Yep. Leading the way and following students' lead. It's really fun. And I must admit that I've become more, well, I would say in the last probably 20 years, become more particular about, the expression, show me, teach me how to do this. Okay, so you're the teacher for 5 minutes. What have you got for me to learn today? For my beginning students, really interesting because they have to pull out, okay, what was the good idea? What am I going to teach? And even to ask them, why is it important?
Yeah.
Instead of me assuming that because it's important, I'm sharing it with them and they'll get that. But it's very interesting to really turn it around. In group lesson, I've been doing it a lot. that I play this game. It's the time for the class to teach. One by one, I go around. I ask them to teach everybody in the class something about playing the piano, and they have to come up. So they have to come up with what to share, and then I ask the really fun question: why should we even bother? Why is this important?
Yeah, that's wonderful. So actually, that comes back. I'm thinking like that can be a wonderful tactic for the last two scenarios I brought up. For the 5-year-old, what can you teach your parent? What do you know about Strabo? Or can you teach this week? Teach your parent how do you do boho? Teach them. So in teaching the parent instead of the other way around might help the child to open up, and then also find the explicitly find the limit. If he finds his own limit, and he'll know like, oh, I need to learn this. And then the other scenario with the over talking dad, if we give the 13-year-old student like, show me what you know or share what you know, perhaps that will give a dad an idea. Oh, actually, my daughter is very capable of this and that and that, and that could be a good tactic to let him figure out he doesn't need to talk that much. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, I do remember a lesson with it. The child was maybe 11 or 12, and we were doing some things. Parents were watching, the older brother was watching, the younger sister was watching. The room was just packed with people. And finally I turned to everybody watching and I said, the person at the piano over here doesn't talk to me when you guys are here. So could you just all go into the waiting room? And they all looked at me like, oh, yeah, okay, that's fine. And I said, it's really interesting because on the weeks when this particular student showed up on her own, we had tons and tons of conversation back and forth with anybody else in the room, whether it was older brother, younger sister, mom, dad, or anybody, or grandma. No, this student had nothing to say. So if it's about what the student and the teacher are going to explore together, and the crowd of people watching on is an inhibitor, then maybe the crowd needs to, reassess.
Right. Or the other way around. I also have found situation where grandparents suddenly visit a private lesson and the child's super proud and
nice.
So, and then wanted to show the grandparents because I have this student, the grandparents will always visit like only twice a year. So for him, it's like super honor. And in that case, he would just open up and he would just, going on and on, bubbling like what he knows about this high position and that note. So I guess it, depends. We should be prepared to have increase all kinds of different kind of interactions, so we know we can understand the kids better, the students better. But like you said, if it's an inhibitor situation, then we definitely need to take it out of the pictures for a safe place, right? For a safe place.
And it comes back to that awareness and involvement, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it's not just about having people involved. It's about having awareness while people are involved.
Yes. That's like a universe now. We have different planets, and then this planet affects the other planet's orbit. And that's very interesting. I think this will be really fun.